Okay, so the purpose of this video is to demonstrate the daily history chart and explain some of the differences between a daily history chart and a data series chart because they can be used for similar things. So to start, I'm again in a wiki page. This is called my reporting sandbox. I could be doing this chart on any wiki page or any card. So I'm going to start by clicking on the daily history chart button in the toolbar. If I hover over it, it says insert daily history chart, and it has the image of a calendar on top of the line graph. So I'm going to click on that. The first thing it asks me is for the aggregate. And again, if you remember from my last video, anything that has a red star next to it is a requirement. Anything that does not have the red star is just an option. Yes. So to start, I need to have something that this chart is measuring. The default is sum with a numeric property name. I could do something like this sum of story points. Or I could do something like count if I just wanted to count the number of cards. But I like the idea of doing story points, and also that is something that is very common. And I'm trying to keep these videos to things that are the most common amongst our users. So next I'm going to look at the start date. This has to be an actual date format, which means I could put something like January 1st, 2016, or I could do something like 01/01/2016. But I could not do something like just like August. Like that's not as enough. It has to be like in standard date format. I could not do something like iteration 10 because that's not a date property. So I'm going to start with April 1st, 2016. My end date will be April, let's do 30th, 2016. And if you remember from the last videos, I could have something called XLabel step, which I'm clicking on this little blue button, this little blue plus sign, which if I hover it over, it turns into a plus sign, which gives me more conditions that I can add to this chart. So I'm going to add the XLabel step, and I'm going to say I want every 7 days to show up because I've got this entire month and I only want 4 dates to show up on my x-axis. Again, the data will still be there. So just because not all the dates are showing on the x-axis does not mean that the dates are not, or that the data will not be there. Again, this is the chart level conditions. Down here we have the series level conditions. The series are the lines on the graph or the bars or whatever it is that is being measured by the graph. So while we're still up in this chart level, we have these chart conditions. So let's say we want to measure story cards, and let's go ahead and add a tree property. If I go to my tree, I can see that my release property is just called release. So I'm going to copy that and I'm going to say release is equal to, and then let's find a release card. Let's go to my workflow tree and see what my releases are called. Let's do version 1.5. That's the name of my release. You can name your releases anything. So this is just what this particular project has as far as the releases. Anytime you're joining conditions, you want to use either an and or an or. So for example, I want this to be both the story and within this version. Maybe I want to do stories or type equals defects. And let's go ahead and wrap that in parentheses because I want it to be either of these card types, and I want both of these card types to be within this particular release. So that's all I'm going to do for the chart conditions. I could add things like I could make the chart bigger, changing the height, the width, the plot height and width. There are other options here like the scope series and completion series. That's a different chart. That's the forecasting or the fixed state chart, which I'm going to cover later. So for now, we're just going to do a simple daily history chart, the most basic kind that most people are using. So other than the X label step that I added, you could add a title. It does automatically grab whatever property you use, so you don't necessarily need titles. And then we're just going to ignore these things for now because that is a different chart. So we're going to move into our series level options. Now I don't need to put the card type again because I already have it up here in the chart conditions. So the chart conditions are global for this chart. The series level conditions are particular to only this series. So let's say I don't want any conditions. It is optional because it does not have the red line. And I'm going to say this is all stories. Or I should say all stories / defects. There we go. And then for the next one, let's see, I want to just grab my status property and I want to say, show me all the ones that have been planned. So I'll say status equals planned stories or defects. And then when I add another series, I want to have multiple lines. So I'm going to use this blue plus sign, which if I hover over it, it says add another series. And as you can see, it adds another series. And I'm going to say status is, what else do we have in status? We have in dev, in QA, production. Let's say we want to see everything that has been committed to production. Status equals production. So these would be completed stories and defects or defects. Okay. So again, we have this little blue plus sign at the bottom. We could add additional conditions. There's not that many that are available. It's just the one for line width, which is a default of 2, which I'm not going to change. But again, if I didn't want the conditions up here, I can just X out of that. And if I decided, never mind, I do want a condition, I can add it back with that blue plus sign. There is a bug in Mingle that does not allow me to change the color through the UI. But I can change that in just a few minutes through the YAML file. So I'm going to click preview just to make sure that there are no errors. This is the correct response. Your daily history chart will display upon saving. That's a good thing. Because it has to calculate through the history, it will take a little while, so it's not going to show a preview. So I'm going to go ahead and click insert. And then I'm going to edit the YAML file, I'm going to hover over it and click the orange button that appears. And you can see the colors are hexadecimals, but it will also accept something just like red. Let's see, I want this one to be blue, and I will make this one yellow. I'll go with the primary colors. There we go, and I'll just click OK. So now I'm going to save my wiki page. And then as you can see, this is the message that you're going to get. It will say, we are calculating data for every day in your date range. There are 13 days in this particular range. Remember, I had an entire month, but I had only showed every 7 days. And then we are completing, or sorry, I have an entire month, but it's already the middle of April, which is why it says 13 days, because it's calculating the past 13 days. We have completed the computation for 0 days so far. And then if I refresh, either that number will go up or the chart will render. Then the chart's already done. It only takes a couple minutes. If you have a smaller date range, for example, this was 13 days, it was almost instantaneous. If I had something that was much larger, like an entire year, and it was calculating, that would take several minutes. There's a background job that runs, so you don't have to be looking at the chart. You could navigate away and do other things. But it does need to calculate, and every time you make a change, it will recalculate. So for example, if I decided I don't like these colors, I could edit, go to my daily history chart. Let's say I don't want yellow, I want green. Okay, click save, and I come down. Now my chart has to recalculate. So that is the downside of using the daily history chart. The upside is it will automatically pull from the card's history. So if I go ahead and click on the history, this is the history tab in my project. As you can see, the changes that I just made to the reporting sandbox show up in my history. I am looking at the last, well, it's actually the last 13 days, but I'm looking at a total of 30 days. And this is all the everything that has been changed within this project is being recorded in the history. That is what the daily history chart is pulling from. So if you you can't cheat this chart. For example, if you moved a card to production and then you tried to say, no, I actually finished it a day earlier, the chart is going to reflect, no, you moved the card on this date, and that is when the date that the card is going to draw from. So let's go ahead and refresh, and it should be ready, and it's ready. So as you can see, I've got, right now I haven't really moved the cards in the last 13 days, so that the lines are just stagnant. But this is the number of story points. As you can see, the size, it says some story points. The number of story points for all of the cards, for just the planned cards, and for just the completed cards. And then as I am finishing story points, this will this green line, will go up because it is showing the completed stories. And if I add additional story points, then all of the lines will go up, depending on the status that they're in, but at least the red line will go up. So I could use this for either the burn down chart or the burn up chart. If again, let's go to the, oh, sorry, this is not. Okay, so if we need help at any point, we can click on the help symbol anywhere in these projects. The little help symbol is scattered throughout the project on everything that links directly to projects. And then I could just do a search for macro, and this is the macro reference chart that I always keep open while I am working on different macros. Here's the daily history chart. This is the one that we were talking about just now. And these are all the different options. This is a much more complicated chart. As you can see, there's multiple lines. But you can add as many as you like. This is just all the different story statuses that this particular project has. And again, you could use the down from, let's see if I can find that, down, to make a burn down chart. And then let's go ahead and cover the difference between daily history and data series charts. So to start, the data series chart, as you saw in the last video, was built on the iteration property, meaning that it was organized by iteration, whereas the daily history chart is organized by date. So in order to have an accurate depiction for a data series chart, you would have to have iterations or sprints. Transitions are very important because it will automatically grab the date property for you. It's a lot more set up for you, whereas the daily history chart is automatically done for you. It's just pulling directly from the card history, which already exists. So there's less setup. The downside would be the data generation. For the data series chart, it's very simple, it's very fast, and you get a preview. When you make a change, it's instantaneous. With the daily history chart, as I showed you before, it has to calculate and it has to go through all those days worth of data. So this can take some time. And additionally, the data series chart has trend lines, whereas if we go back to our daily history chart, we have the 3 lines that we created. We don't have a trend line unless we're looking at either the forecasting or the fixed date charts, which again, we will get into those in different videos. This is just the simple daily history chart. So there is no trend line. There's some more information about the aggregates, but those are the main differences between the two. And if we scroll up, you can see this is the data series chart I did in the last video. You can see the trend lines that are there. This is the daily history chart. You can see there is no trend line, but it can be used for similar purposes. So I feel like if you already use transitions and you already have those date properties being, well, let me show you what I'm talking about. The date properties that I'm talking about would be something like move to in dev grabs a date. That's the date property that I'm talking about. If you have these already set up, if you already use card transitions, then I would say use the data series chart. It's going to be, I think it's better. It has more options. Um, but if you don't have that already set up, if you want something quick, if you want something to pull directly from history, if you don't want to rely on transitions, or you don't want to rely on people filling out date properties because sometimes people forget, then the daily history chart would be a better option for you. So I think I will leave it at that. Next, we're going to go over the fixed date and the forecasting charts. So we'll do some more daily history charts that are a little bit more complicated. So I will go ahead and end this video on that.